This is an unfiltered me. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. This is a note to myself from 25 years ago to right now. This is my journey in higher education life. That journey began back on August 31st, 1998, when I stepped onto the campus of the University of Akron as a college student for the very first time. I did not know what I was going to expect. Among the classes that I had in that first semester were college reading and study skill for four load hours, into the criminal justice for three credit hours, elements of math 1 for 2 credit hours, elements of math 2 for 2 credit hours, English 121 for 4 credit hours. And that was the extent of it, of my first semester. It was mostly general education classes. But in that first semester, I didn't know how to use resources well. I did not go to the math lab when I was supposed to because I struggled mightily in the Elements of Math 1 class, which is sort of like a general algebra class that prepares me for Elements of Math 2, which is more like college algebra. Since I was enrolled in the Community and Technical College, which was the name at the time before it became Summit College years later. By the midway point of that first semester, I had failed Elements of Math 1, and I was forced to withdraw from Elements of Math 2 because I needed Elements 1 as the prerequisite. And by the end of that first semester, I did not do well. I received an F in Elements 1, an F in English 121, a D plus in Intro to Criminal Justice, and I passed college reading and study skill, which was part of developmental programs at the time, since it was housed in the then Carroll Hall, which has since been demolished. My GPA at the end of that first semester was 0.43. In that time, you received your final grades in the mail before technology became more modern. And then within a few days, I received another letter from the University of Akron telling me that I had been academically dismissed. But I said to myself, I'm not going to let this dream die. So what I did was I put out a call to one of my former places of work, United Disability Service, and stated my case, and I asked to write a letter explaining that I had been dismissed and I was trying to get reinstated. I did write the letter, and I did it in less than 2 hours. It had to be proofread. And then within a few days, I had gotten a call saying that I had been academically reinstated and placed back on academic probation. However, I only had that one class in the spring of 1999, which was basic writing, and that was 4 load hours, and I passed that. Then, fall 99 came. I started to get a feel for what I needed to do. So, some of the classes that I took were effective oral communication, which is out of the School of Communication. That was a class I took at 7:45 on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. and that was 3 credit hours, 4 credits of government and politics in the United States. I also had a 1 credit workshop of marriage and family, and I did take basic math 2 because I need credit math. And needless to say, I did well in that semester. I did pretty well in effective oral communication class and GMP, both lecture and discussion. Passed basic math 2, and I was on my way. Then came the important semester of spring 2000. In that semester, I was retaking 2 of the 3 classes that I had gotten below a C-. I took Elements of Math 1. The professor was Frank Gruccio. I got an A in that class. I took it in the second half of the semester. I retook Intro to Criminal Justice, and that was a Monday evening class from 5:20 to 7:50 with the late Ken McCormick. I did pretty well in that class. I think I got like a C or C+ in that class. And I got a C in Intro to Sociology, and with its late dean of students. And he was housed in his office in the old Gardner Student Center at the time, which is not there anymore, which has now been replaced by the more modern Gene Haber Tower Student Union. And I got a C in that class. That's how I got back to good standing with a GPA over 2.0, but I had to withdraw from U.S. history since 1877 and Intro to Psychology since I was back in the hidden curriculum, with something I didn't need to do. The fall of 2000, I took no classes since I forgot to do my FAFSA, and it was me. I was too pragmatic. There were so many personal issues at the time, and I was too late, and I didn't have urgency. As had I done that 6 months earlier, then I wouldn't have been in that problem. So I went back in the spring of 2001. The classes I took were Elements of Math 2 in the Polsky Building in C&T College, State and Local Government in the Department of Political Science, English 121 with the late Jeffrey Schatz. So that was 9 credit hours right there. And a couple of other classes. And I passed all those classes, and I was able to do well, and then keep that momentum going in the spring of 2001. And then fall 2001 came, and that was the semester of 9/11. Among those classes I was in for fall of 2001 were Evidence in Criminal Legal Procedure with the late Professor Anthony LaSalvia. I had Math for Modern Tech, Basic Chemistry. So that was 10 credit hours right there. And I had American Presidency in spring of 01. And of course, the other class from spring of '01 was self-defense and developmental chemistry. I did pretty well in that semester. I ended up getting a 3.5 GPA, and then my GPA went up to 3.03. And then to spring of 2002. That was a difficult semester since I was starting to take tougher classes, but I was too hard on myself. And of course, those classes were natural science biology, which I got a C because I struggled mightily in that class, and natural science is not my strong suit. I got a C plus barely in English composition 2 since it was a 745 class. It was more about argumentation and persuasion. My writing wasn't good, but I was continuing to hone my craft. I briefly took ICH in Ohio, but I withdrew from that class. I did get a C plus in Math for Liberal Arts. That was with then Professor Dr. Jeffrey Adler, who has since moved away. He was a really good professor. And I had Women in Politics, which was a special topic in political science, and I got an A in that class. My term GPA was 2.6, but my overall GPA fell under 3. And even though I was now a sophomore, but I kept persevering and persevering. Then came the turning point in fall of 2002, where I had 14 credit hours total, but I withdrew from 2 classes. One was beginning Spanish 1, where I was having trouble with my speech. And of course, I am neurodivergent and I have that speech impediment, which prevented me from speaking Spanish effectively. And I also had intellectual thought, since I underperformed on the midterm exam. And looking back, I shouldn't have changed my major from criminal justice technology to political science American track. It was truly going to be political science criminal justice. And it was all about looking for that right fit. And I say this all the time. When selecting a major, it's all about fit. And I wasn't getting the correct advising. I was trying to advise myself. It just didn't work. And I spoke with officials from the Office of Student Financial Aid, and they told me if I withdrew from one more class, I would not get Title IV financial aid, and I would have to find other resources to pay for my college and hopefully finish my degree. Because I made a commitment to myself that from this point on, I'm going to commit myself to these classes and I'm going to pass every one of them. And it started in spring 2003, where I had 8 credit hours. I had to include 2 special topics. One special topic, It was political science insight. We had to attend 5 of 7 speakers and attend a Saturday session. I did pretty well in that class, A. I did very well in my internship, where I got an A minus, and I did 4 credit hours, where I did that at the Child Support Enforcement Agency at the Summit County Prosecutor's Office. And I got an A in American Interest Groups, taught by Dr. David Cohen. Pretty good friend of mine, and I've had him several times because he knows my knowledge of Political Science. I was doing well with a term GPA of 3.5, but it went back up to 2.97. Had I taken one more class or two more classes, I would have been back up to GPA of 3.0. Fall 2003, that was a pretty good semester. I began taking courses in the Center for Conflict Management, and I was doing a certificate in political conflict. I took Dr. Lyons' Law, Mediation, Violence class. I got an A for that, A- for that class. And I took Dr. Farmer's Campaign Management 1 class, which is now a different name. And I got a B in that class. For that class, I took 20 years ago. I had to go to the computer-based testing center in the old Carroll Hall on the 3rd floor, where I would be working there 4 years later, which would be my first really hands-on position working directly with students in higher education, where I took a computer-based exam, and there were 4 questions. I had to answer 2 of them within a 2-hour time limit. And I couldn't have anything on the table. All of my belongings were underneath the table. And there were a lot of cameras around the testing center. And you're being constantly watched to make sure you're not cheating. That term GPA got a 3.35, and my GPA for overall was flipped back to 3.01 exactly. And by that time, I was already a junior, where I'd become a junior in the spring of 03. And then I was nearing 70 credit hours completed by the end of 2003 calendar year. Then came the spring of 2004. I did very well, 14 credit hours. I included 3 A's in that class. Those A's were the Black Experience since 1877 with the late Marvin Peake, Law and Society, and Politics of the Criminal Justice System with Dr. Nancy Marion, who is now the chair of the Political Science Department. And then I had Criminal Law for Police. I got a B- in that class with Ms. Melhoff. And then I got a B+ for Western European Politics, which is now European Politics, with now Professor Emeritus Dr. James Sperling. That was a Dean's List semester, 3.571, and my GPA became 3.107. Fall 04, spring 05 were both part-time. I took the Intro to Women's Studies class to complete my area studies in cultural diversity. I got an A in that class. Campaign Battleground was another special topic, which was an elective. I got an A in that class. Spring 05, I got an A in International Politics and Institutions. Dr. David Lauscher was the professor. And I had Jerry Austin for Campaign Management 2, where I got a B+. I had a 3.65 for the spring 05 term, and an overall GPA of 3.2. So 04-05 was really good. And then those final 2 years where I really kicked it into overdrive. Spring 05, fall 05, and spring 06, I had 13 credit hours each. It was nothing but A's and B's overall. I got 2 A's in fall 05. They were community corrections and administration, prisons, probation, and parole. Community corrections was taught by Stan Smith, and prisons, probation, and parole was taught by Dr. Dina Hanley. The B's I got were for the other 2 political science classes. There were 3 total. The first was Policy Problems in Criminal Justice, with Dr. Marion. Had to learn a lot about the policy issues in criminal justice, especially cost-benefit analysis, risk-benefit analysis. I had to learn about decision trees. A little bit of quantitative work in that class. And then I had a 4-credit class called Comparative Politics with Dr. Alethea Cook, who's now the chair of the Political Science Department at East Carolina University. But I still got a 3.462 fall 05 GPA, and my overall GPA was 3.232. And by spring of 2006, I was really heading towards graduation. I had gotten a B- in critical reading and writing with Dr. Cheryl Stevenson because Alethea Cook, who was my academic advisor at the time, told me if I wanted to get into graduate school, I needed to become a better writer. And I think that advising appointment in the fall of 2005 really helped because at that time, I was already a senior. And a lot of the seniors, when you have over 90 credit hours, you have first crack at the classes that you'll need to complete in terms of graduation. But I was still a year away. I did get an A in the ethics class, Intro to Ethics. That was a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class at 2 p.m. I had the mediation skills class with Dr. Lyons, B+. I did get an A in criminology with Dr. Carl Glotz. He was really good at that time. That was my second class out of the Department of Sociology. And I got a B+ in visual arts awareness with Ms. Susan McKiernan. On a lot of those days, especially when they were cold, I would go from the political science department and walk all the way to Folk Hall where I would attend class. Sometimes I would go to the Emily Davis Museum, which is located in Folk Hall, and see the modern exhibits, which were temporary, and they still are temporary today. I had a 3.485 spring GPA and an overall GPA of 3.26. Summer of 06 was only 2 classes, the American Congress and Political Scandals and Corruption, taught by Drs. Cohen and Marion respectively. Got A's for both, 4.0 GPA, 3.295 overall. And then my final semester was only 2 classes. One was Constitutional Problems in Criminal Justice with Tom Watkins. I worked really hard in that class, and I got an A because we had pop quizzes, and we had to write a lot of short papers with legal questions and coming up with the opinions because we had to think like attorneys. And we did have to write research papers in that class. And I got a B in descriptive astronomy because I never took a physics class in my life, but I needed it to complete my science requirement to graduate. And I completed 7 credit hours, and they were all earned, 3.429 GPA, and I graduated with a 3.302 GPA. And I graduated in my contract year with 132 completed credit hours. A minimum of 131 is needed to graduate with a degree at the time from the University of Akron. Now it's 120. I ended up graduating on December 16th, 2006 with a Bachelor of Science in Political Science Criminal Justice and with undergraduate certificates in Applied Politics from the Bliss Institute and Political Conflict from the Center for Conflict Management, and minor degrees in criminal justice technology with a corrections concentration, and a minor in political science with an American track concentration. Even though I was happy I graduated, I had burned out. But I had planned on going to graduate school. So what I did was I took a gap semester, or mostly a 9-month gap year, to be refreshed. And looking back on this, I probably would have jumped right into graduate school right away. When I got to graduate school in the fall of 2007, I went into political science. However, I didn't realize that year and a half in political science was going to be more difficult than I ever imagined. There were long, restless days, sleepless nights, not knowing would I ever progress through the program. But I really liked a couple of those classes, 3 of them: Politics and the Media with Dr. Stephen Brooks, who is now retired, great guy. Had Dr. Cohen for National Politics. I wrote like a 30-page paper in that class about new media in politics. And the class from Mr. Watkins titled Supreme Court and Constitutional Law, where the graduate students had to write a research paper. But in looking back, I had that conversation with Dr. Ryan Delaney. He's still there today. He still teaches the Scope and Theory class. And he was absolutely right. He said that education was going to be a better fit for me as a graduate student. So what I did was I went over to the old Silk Hall before it was renovated years later, and I spoke with a lady named Ms. Betsy Kearns, who now works at Ohio University. And I laid out the situation for her, and she encouraged me to reapply for graduate school and change programs from political science to higher education administration. And looking back, that was the greatest decision I've ever made. Not only as a student, undergraduate or graduate, but as a human being. And that was my saving grace. And for the next 2 years, I was in a cohort with several students who I'm still friends with to this day, having the same classes and learning from each other. Being in groups, sending out emails, staying in contact through phone calls and text, making sure that our part of the group project is completed, and completing our own individual assignments. Even though it was difficult, we had to complete everything, and I was willing to go the extra mile to complete those assignments and do the internship in the missions which I did in the summer of 2010. Then came October 9th, 2010. It was a Saturday morning. For 3 hours, myself and about 15 or 16 other students took the comprehensive exam. There were 8 questions total, and we had to answer 3 of them, with administration and higher education being the first question. I pulled everything that I learned from the program and put everything down on to a Word document. It was everything I learned over 2 years, and I studied for 2 months. And that was the important thing, was to study, 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 and being part of study groups, sharing information, and making sure that everything was accurate and that I cited well. And a lot of that came from the Advanced Administrative Colloquium in Higher Education class, which is 5190-600. That's the final class students have to take in order to graduate, and it's required in their final semester. And it's an entire review of the entire program. Classes like law, assessment, college student, admin, curriculum, finance, multicultural. It was all about every class I've learned from the program. I answered the other two questions from the history and philosophy of higher education and student services in higher education. I finished the exam with 10 minutes left, and it wasn't easy writing in comps and completing the comps within 3 hours. And of course, you didn't know comps is short for comprehensive exam. And then I turned my exam in, I printed it out. The only thing I could do now was wait. I kept going to class, doing research, completing assignments, participating in class. And then I got an email 20 days later from the administrative assistant at the time, Lana Martirana, in the Department of Educational Leadership, informing me that I had passed my comps on my first attempt. I prayed about it and prayed about it and prayed that I would pass comps. And also it was speaking to God, and I also prayed silently. And when that email, when I got the email, it solidified me as a graduate of the University of Akron for the second time, which I did less than 2 months later on December 11th, 2010. But little did I know was, for a period of about 3.5, 4 years, there were a few interviews here and there, a lot of job applications, and no opportunities came my way. Then I got an opportunity, and the call came from James Hardy saying, why don't you do a part-time opportunity at Kent State University, and it can help you build up some abilities and some experience that will parlay that into a full-time career in higher education when you leave. So I did that. I spent about 3.5 months working at Kent State University, working as a clerical specialist and researcher, working with two great people, Dr. Red Collins and Dr. Gina Campana. Dr. Collins now lives in another part of the country, and Gina now works at Neomed, Northeast Ohio Medical School in Rootstown, Ohio. And I'm still friends with Gina and Dr. Collins to this day. They really showed me who I am and made me a better person. And they recognized my special talents. And I served them well. And they treated me with the utmost respect, not only as an employee, but also as a human being. A year later, I would get my first full-time position in higher education, working at UA as a student success coach. And I worked there for about a year. It was difficult at first, but it was doable. And I got to have great relationships with the students, ask a lot of open-ended questions, and meet the students where they're at. And that was a good experience, and I'm still great friends with all the student success coaches to this day. Then came the fall of 2016. I leave the state that I've known for all my life, and I got to work at Kansas State University as an academic coaching counselor. But it did not work out. And during that 5-year period from the spring of 2017, the late spring, until the spring of 2022, I wanted to get back into higher education because that was my life's goal. And what I was called to do. God called me. And when one door closes, God opens another. Little did I know that God wouldn't open that door for another 5 years. And in that time, I worked a Plan B job, and conversations with a lot of friends, family, and associates told me, do something in the interim until something really comes up. Then the pandemic hits. It affected all of us. I persevered for another 2 years, and then, lo and behold, the opportunity of a lifetime. I'm still here at my current place to this very day as an academic advisor. I feel that my academic advising experience as a student shaped me for the person who I am today. And I like what I do. I work with the students. I take my time with them. I listen to their needs and concerns and come up with the right responses that will keep them engaged, retained, and graduate on time in 4 years. So that is my 25-year journey from my first day in college to the present day. This is me speaking from my heart. It was an unfiltered me. And I hope your journey will be just as fruitful as mine, with some bumps along the way. And you can do it. God watches down on all of us. And I'm one of God's children. Thank you.